Welcome you guys. My name is Maletzke. I'm the statewide wolf specialist with Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife. Once a year, usually the end of March or April, we kind of figure out all the numbers for all the management actions and the number of wolves that we have on the landscape as we're trying to reassess wolf recovery in Washington. And so today I'm going to present the wolf update from all of our information culminated from January through December in 2018. And go over that information with you guys today. Wolves started to recolonize Washington back in 2008, and our first pack was a lookout pack. But a little bit before that, we started realizing that wolves were starting to show up on the landscape, and a group of stakeholders and staff from Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife started to build a wolf plan. And that plan was adopted in 2011. But in that plan, we had 4 main objectives that we wanted to have as wolves recolonize the state. And so one of those is to restore self-sustaining wolf populations, to maintain healthy ungulate populations. We certainly wanted to manage our wolf livestock conflicts and make sure we weren't impacting people's livelihoods. But we also wanted to develop a public understanding and promote coexistence of wolves on the landscape. This is a relatively new animal to Washington, and so we wanted to make sure that folks understood a little bit more about the ecology and wolves being on the landscape. So wolves are coming in from British Columbia, from Idaho, and from the Blue Mountains, Oregon area. We have not reintroduced wolves to Washington State. All the wolves that have here were either born here in Washington or they've come in from other jurisdictions. And so the areas that we're seeing them come in, northeast Washington has a number of packs now, the Blue Mountains and the north central part of the state. And as wolves continue to come in, or as Oregon's population increases, they may come in from the south. But that's where the wolves came from that are currently in Washington. So as far as the status of wolves, so there's a federal listing status and there's a statewide listing status for wolves. Under the federal listing, back in 2007, the eastern third of Washington was actually brought into the Northern Rocky Mountain distinct population segment. And then that area was actually delisted federally in 2011. But everything west of Highway 97 and the center part of the state, or the eastern 2/3, in this eastern 2/3, it's still federally listed as endangered species. And so in the eastern 1/3, this area is all under state management, under our Wolf Conservation Management Plan. But everything to the western 2/3, we work with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to manage those wolves. Statewide, wolves are actually listed as endangered species across the entire state. And so we use the Wolf Conservation Management Plan to manage those wolves. We've broken the state down into 3 recovery areas. We've got the Eastern Washington recovery area, the North Cascades, and the South Cascades coastal recovery area. And we work with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, state agencies, and tribal co-managers to manage those populations in that area. To get to recovery goals, we'd actually like to see at least 4 successful breeding pairs in each of those recovery regions. And right now we're working, we've kind of reached those goals for the eastern recovery area, and we're getting closer. I'll go over those numbers shortly, the North Cascades. And then we haven't had any wolf pack activity in the South Cascades yet. So we're working towards those. I talked about successful breeding pairs. So some of the definitions we use, a pack is 2 wolves traveling together on the landscape, and so within a defined territory. So they're staying in the same place on the landscape, roughly about a 300 square mile territory. With a successful breeding pair, we want to see 2 adults raising 2 pups until December 31st of that year. And so we want to see the recruitment, and that helps us get to those recovery goals. And so this is our metric to understand recovery, that they're reproducing, and we've got a sustainable population there. And so to keep up with recovery, we want to monitor that population. We want to see where packs are establishing. We want to see how many wolves are out there. And so one of the main ways we do that is from sighting reports from the public. You know, there's relatively few staff compared to the amount of citizens in Washington State. And so those reports from the public, we have places online that you can report a wolf observation on the WDFW website. And with those observations, that helps us focus in on certain areas of the state where we might have wolves established and a pack established. And then we'll follow up with surveys with some remote camera work or tracking surveys in the wintertime. And then if we can, we'll actually go out there in the summertime and try and put traps in the ground where we can catch them, and then we can immobilize them and put a collar on those wolves. And then we also, in the wintertime, if we want to switch out a collar or if we want to add another collar to another pack member in that particular pack, we can use a helicopter and actually go in and collar those wolves by darting them out of a helicopter. In 2018, we were able to capture 9 wolves from 8 different packs. Over the course of the year in 2018, we've monitored 20 different wolves from 15 different packs. We're currently monitoring, it says 18 wolves, but even since I created this presentation 3 weeks ago, we've lost 2 wolves in that. One collar battery malfunctioned, another one was killed. So that's a very dynamic number. We're constantly trying to keep tabs on these packs and collar animals, but that number changes an awful lot. But still, to have collars in 11 packs, 41% of the known packs, that gives us a lot of information about wolves in the state. And so this is a map of the areas where we have known packs in Washington as of December 31st, 2018. This year was pretty exciting in the sense that we had our first West Side pack established. We've been monitoring the wolf in the Skagit area, since 2017. That wolf was traveling alone for a good chunk of last year, but the surveys last winter, we confirmed that it was with another individual. And so we had our first West Side pack in the North Cascades called Diopsid Creek. Another new pack that we were able to confirm is the Nanum pack, which is north of Allensburg. So we're starting to see the North Cascades increase in the number of packs and increase in numbers. We also had 3 successful breeding pairs. The Deanaway, the Lookout, and Loop pack were 3 successful breeding pairs, so that moves us one away from our recovery goals in the North Cascades. That's really promising for wolf recovery. We've also seen a couple packs come back on. Sherman pack wasn't on last year. We had 5 sisters down in this area. That pack dissolved for some unknown reason, but that's part of wolf ecology. Another new pack that we had was Butte Creek. One of the members of the Tushy pack actually moved out of that pack. That pack dissolved, and one dispersed to Idaho. Another one created that Butte Creek pack. And then, so we have 4 packs in the Blue Mountains. One thing that this map doesn't necessarily depict, we work with other state entities to look at. There's another pack, the Wall Wall pack, that's formed in Oregon. The Butte Creek pack goes into Oregon a little bit. Grouse Flats goes into Oregon. But I work with the Oregon biologist. They account for numbers, we account for numbers. If those packs tend to breed and have pups in another state, we don't include them in our numbers. So this map incorporates all the wolf packs that are kind of breeding and having pups in Washington. We know there's other wolves that come up into the state and dip in a little bit. So just to be accurate on numbers, those numbers are counted in Oregon. We count the ones that we count Washington. We work together to make sure nationally that those numbers are realistic to what's on the landscape. One thing about wolves, they're incredibly territorial. And so this is a map of the movements of one wolf within a pack territory. I kind of equate it to a wagon wheel because you have the hub in the center where they're constantly moving through, but then they patrol the outer edges of those packs throughout the year to keep other wolves out and to maintain that territory. So this territory is roughly about 310 square miles. And so it's a big area that they patrol. They need to have enough resources and food, and they want to raise their pups and keep them safe, so they maintain that large territory that has those resources in there to do that. And so this is another map to kind of explain that and kind of take it a little step further. So each pack is kind of a family unit. You have pups, you have the breeding pair, and then they have pups. Those pups may grow, and then some of them may stay for a second year and help raise those pups. And so this is a family unit. And so each one of these packs that we have, each one of these polygons is that family unit. And there's a lot of site fidelity. They tend to stay, when a pack establishes, they tend to use that same area year after year. And so I threw a couple different maps up starting in 2016, and you can see the names of those packs are consistent, and the locations where those packs are found each year is very consistent on the landscape. And that's a really important factor in understanding how we get counts and how we monitor these wolves. If you look at Salmo, for all 3 years, it's in the same spot in the state. We monitor size. Their numbers in that pack may change a little bit. The pack territory, shape, and size may change a little bit, but the main location on the landscape they use is the same. And so I kind of equate that to family units for people. You might have a house and you have your fenced yard. You live in that house. Well, someone may sell it and it may be vacant for 6 months, but then another family's going to move in. And so it's the same with the wolf packs. And so, in 16 we had Sherman pack. In 17 it was gone, and so was profanity. But back in 2018 we have those packs again, utilizing similar areas. It might be new wolves that moved into those areas. They may or may not have been related to the previous packs, but they're utilizing very similar places on the landscape. And so if you think about them more as that kind of family unit and more of a house and property, that's kind of how wolf packs assemble themselves, and that's due to that territorial nature of a wolf pack. And so if we get down into the nitty-gritty of the numbers for each of those packs, this is the Eastern Washington recovery area. We had 12 successful breeding pairs in this area, and then our average pack size, you can see, ranged from 2 to 11 up in Carpenter Ridge. The average pack size is about 4 individuals per pack, and so that's what we saw. There was a lot of 2s and 3s last year, a lot of smaller packs. That's kind of the nature when in the Eastern Washington recovery area. We've hit that. I'm going to bounce back real quick. The Northeast area has kind of hit that capacity. We've filled in a lot of these packs, and so there's not a lot of room for new packs to establish. There's not a lot of new range, and so those numbers this year, we didn't see a big rise in the number of wolves on that landscape. But the North Cascades area, there's a lot of range here that wolves could establish and set up packs, and so that's where I would expect to see those numbers increase in the years to come, and then kind of see a leveling off of numbers. It's going to ebb and flow for a couple of years on a little bit, but this is where we'll see those main numbers increase. So when we look at that, I guess I'm not too surprised to see the numbers in a little bit smaller pack sizes in each of those areas. Some of those wolves may die, some of those wolves may disperse out to other areas, but that's kind of what we had. We did have 11 known mortalities of wolves this past year that ranged from legal hunting by the Colville Confederated Tribes, the Spokane tribe in Northeast. They have legal hunting seasons for wolves. So 6 of those wolves were due to that. We had 4 agency removals due to livestock depredations, where we wanted to try and alter those pack behaviors so that they would stop depredating on cattle. And then we also had 11 livestock killed in the Eastern Washington recovery area, and 19 others injured in that area from wolves. And so I'll go into that a little bit further. And then we had 2 known dispersals out of the Tushy pack, and one created the View Creek pack, as I said, and the other went to Idaho. And in the North Cascades recovery area, again, we had 3 successful breeding pairs. We had a minimum count of 22 wolves in this area. We had 1 mortality out of the Nanum pack, and then we did have some livestock injuries, and then 1 livestock that was killed by wolves in this recovery region. So as overall population status, the population continued to rise. We went from 122 to 126 wolves this year, so not a big increase, but a slight increase in numbers. But we had 15 successful breeding pairs, 12 total mortalities, 2 dispersal events, and 12 livestock killed statewide by wolves. And so if we look at that more into a chart format, here's the minimum number of wolves. Again, we're steadily seeing that increase in wolves statewide. Recovery is still moving forward. The successful breeding pairs, where I talked about those wolves getting to capacity in the Eastern Washington recovery area, we kind of did see a little bit of a cap and a drop by 1 pack in the eastern Washington recovery area. But our North Cascades has been going kind of slow over a few years, but we saw a rise this year, so that's promising as far as wolf recovery goes in that North Cascades recovery region. And so the trend in the number of wolf packs, we still saw those couple packs that weren't there last year, the Sherman pack, the OPT, we had Nason pack, a couple of those packs in eastern Washington that weren't there. So we did see an increase as those packs came back online this last year. And then we did see an increase with the new Dabs, Creek pack and the Nanum pack in the North Cascades. So we're starting to see that increase in the North Cascades. Nothing earth-shattering about the known mortalities. We always have a couple known mortalities, not a significant increase. This last year actually was a slight decrease over last year. And so no major red flags on the number of wolf mortalities. And then this is a map of those dispersals I mentioned. So this was the 2 pack up in this area. The one wolf actually moved down here into this area and started to settle in. We did document with another individual this past year. And so we actually called it the Beaver Creek pack. Since that time, we've actually looked at where the old 2 pack was, and there's 4 new individuals that set up a territory in that area. So we still have a pack in this area. I think the ones that were there were kicked out. Another pack kind of took its place. And then this was the travel path of this guy that went all the way down towards McCall and set up right down on the Idaho-Oregon border. So the overall population summary, the number, we had 27 known packs in Washington, 126 wolves. And again, this is a minimum count. So when we go out and actually count those individuals, we physically see them from an aircraft or a helicopter when we actually do the surveys, or we get out and we physically count the number of tracks in each of those pack territories. We can go out and consistently find them over multiple surveys, and we get an estimate of the number of wolves in each pack. And so this is a physical count. There is, we know there's dispersals and individuals on the landscape. Based on the literature and other areas that are recovering, that's about 12.5%. So this number is increased our minimum known count. We multiply that by 12.5% and add that in to this metric. So it does include that as well. This year we only had about a 3% increase as far as the minimum number of wolves. But our overall increase is still around 28% since we've been recording wolf recovery in Washington. And so that's fairly consistent with other areas. The known wolf mortality is 12. The number of depredating packs was 19% this year. So 5 of the 27 packs that we had on the landscape were involved with livestock. But that's pretty promising since that 81% of our packs didn't have any interactions with livestock and are doing just fine out there. And so, and we've got a number of things that we can do to protect those livestock in places where those packs are depredating. And so as I get into those numbers, some of those things, we have wildlife conflict specialists throughout the state that are out there to work with livestock producers and help bring tools that they can use to help keep those livestock safe, both on public range allotments and in smaller private pastures. We've actually got some cooperative agreements where we can help cost share some of those non-lethals and help get folks used to using things to help protect those livestock. We also contract with range riders out on the landscape to help monitor cattle on public grazing allotments and then use other deterrence measures. If those tools fail, we also have it in the eastern 1/3 of the state. We have lethal removal as a tool, and we can incrementally remove wolves to try and change that pack behavior. And then we also do compensation. If wolves are killing livestock, we can compensate for those livestock for the commercial producers that lose cattle or sheep. And so the contracted range riders are one of our major tools, and that's somebody on the landscape in and around the cattle to really monitor if they're sick or injured or dead livestock, and get those cleared off of there so that they aren't vulnerable to attacks by wolves. And then they also can keep cattle kind of herded up. They can look at animal behavior of those cows and see if they've been stirred up at all. They can kind of keep them out of areas they shouldn't be, keep them kind of congregated on the range so they can keep track of them better. And it can be a fairly effective tool to keep cattle and livestock safe. And so there's a number of other deterrence measures, whether it's herding dogs in conjunction with the sheep herder. Certainly sanitation is a big one. Timing a turnout, letting those calves get a little bit bigger, sometimes 200 pounds or larger, so that they're a more formidable opponent. If there's wolves on the landscape, they're less likely to get injured or chased by wolves. Different types of fencing, fox lights, rag boxes. If we have a collar in that pack, we can have it's a radio activated guard. If that collar comes close, it sends out a bunch of noise and sounds. That's a picture of one right here. So they can move that with a herd. And then as the wolves come closer, that emits sounds. It notifies the herder or the range rider, but it also, can scare away those wolves. So, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, we had 5 packs of the 27 that actually depredated on livestock. So the overwhelming majority, we didn't have any interactions with livestock. But those 5 packs, we worked intensively with the producers in those areas and tried to mitigate those livestock depredations from happening. And so the number of depredations, if you can kind of look at, this year wasn't a lot different than the other previous years. It's that kind of 20% of the packs that tend to get into livestock. And we had some recurring depredations. And then the 2018 mortalities by month, primarily most of these interactions between wolves and livestock are occurring during the summer months when wolves are out on, when cattle are out on the public grazing allotments. And so this is, that July, August, September, we didn't have much in July this year, but August, September, October, as soon as the cows are rounded up and brought off of the allotment, things kind of die down again. And so we have very few problems on private pastures. And we do on occasion, but most of the interactions occur on those public grazing allotments during the summer months when the cattle are out there. Talk a little bit about how we respond to that. We developed this protocol in 2017. We're always trying to refine things and make things better. But this is one of those tools that we use to help guide when we have interactions between wolves and livestock. It kind of helps define what reoccurring depredations and chronic depredations are. We use 3 in 30 days or 4 within 10 months for depredations within 10 months. And that kind of helps us look at how we go, but we would want producers to be doing non-lethals and preventative measures before those depredations occur. We want to make sure that we're doing as much as we can to protect those livestock. If that stuff fails, we have some guidelines about when we would act and what we would do if we needed to lethally remove or incrementally remove wolves from a certain pack. That helps guide us, and this document is available online as well. As I mentioned, as one of our objectives, we want to make sure that we have healthy ungulate populations. The state legislature actually allocated some money to the department to start doing a predator-prey project. And so we have a study area up in northeast Washington near the Chihuahua area. And then we have another study area in the Okanagan near Winthrop and Twisp. And so we're monitoring mule deer, we're monitoring whitetail, elk. We had moose collared for a time. We've got cougars collared, we've got wolf packs collared in those areas. And we're looking at all those movements and all the overlap of all those species and trying to assess the impact of those carnivores on the landscape in conjunction with the ungulates, the deer and the elk. And so that stuff is looking to go through about 2021. We'll be collecting data, so we don't have a lot of those results yet, but there's a number of graduate students through University of Washington that are working on each small kind of piece of the pie in that research. And so, some are doing ungulate components, some are looking at interactions between the carnivores, some are looking at mesocarnivores, the coyotes and the bobcats and smaller scale, or the smaller critters out there. We're looking at long-term monitoring methods for wolves. And so there's a bunch of good research going out there to help identify those things. And then we also, wolf management is constantly evolving. We're getting closer to our recovery goals, and we need to figure out what to do with wolves when we get to that recovery. How are we going to manage them in the long run? And so, but we also have ongoing things with livestock depredations and how to handle those. We've got a wolf advisory group that helps us guide our management decisions, and it's a group of stakeholders from Cattlemen's Association, conservation groups, hunters, hikers, citizens at large in Washington, that we get a well-rounded viewpoint of all these different folks in Washington, and it helps us guide our management decisions and kind of keep it centered as best we can. And so we worked on some of that guidance of wolf management this last year. We kind of restructured how many folks in the department were participating in that. And then we also started to begin discussions of how wolf management is going to look after we get to those delisting goals. We're just cracking into the surface. We definitely want to get a lot of input from citizens of Washington before we make any management decisions about what a wolf plan is going to look like post-delisting. So, and then the other part is this outreach component. It's talking to the public, it's talking to different user groups in Washington, the citizens of Washington, sharing what we know about wolf ecology, sharing about numbers, sharing everything that we're doing out there, so that people have a little bit more willingness to coexist with wolves on the landscape. And you know, so we do all kinds of formal presentations, you know, try and reach out to the public because they get a hold of us. We have the wolf advisory group. We've got a ton of daily interactions, whether that's news media or just working with the public. And so try and do a lot of different things for outreach.